You're good. We're live.
Great, thank you. Okay, welcome everybody to the newly formed first meeting of the Return to Learn Task Force. I know that when we put out the all call for this, we were calling it a remote learning task force or a distance learning task force, but actually we've kind of adjusted a little bit because I think we're going to have more of an opportunity to be back together in the fall than we thought, which is great news. So I first and foremost just want to thank everyone for coming today to get us started. And I just want to briefly go through our agenda. We are going to do some short introductions, and I'll tell you how we're going to do that in a second. But we'll talk a little bit about our norms for these meetings and kind of the role of this group, the logistics of how we're going to be working together, our meeting structure, or kind of brief overview of what these meetings are going to look like. Then Dr. Sophie is with us today on one of her last days. I've asked her to actually join us to give us some feedback on remote learning from her perspective as we're moving forward into thinking of how we can adjust and improve moving forward into the fall. We're going to talk about the 3 scenarios that the administrative team has been planning for and watching the guidance around. And then we're going to talk about whether or not we want to break into subcommittees and how we would do that. And then finally have a wrap up and a quick review with any questions or ending thoughts. So with that, I am actually going to go through the participant list and I'll just call first names and have people, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself and kind of tell us your role and the grades you represent. So if you're a teacher, then what grades that you work with. If you're one of our parents, then please talk about the grades your children are in. And just kind of briefly, if there's anything that you want to tell us as we start this work. So I will begin. My name is Lisa Leali. I'm so excited to be here as the incoming superintendent of Lake Bluff. And with that, I will move to Shelley, who's here with me.
I'm Shelley Goff, and I am the administrative assistant to the superintendent.
Thank you. Jean.
Hello, I'm Jean Sophie, and I am the superintendent of schools for 4 more days, but who's counting? And I'm just really excited for Lisa to get started and talk to all of you. I think it's a much more positive outlook for the beginning of school, which makes me feel better as I leave to go enjoy my retirement. So,
and we will let you enjoy it. I won't bother you too much.
You can bother anytime.
Paige.
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm Paige Soule. I'm the library media specialist for our elementary school, which is pre-K through 5th grade.
Excellent. Thank you. Adrian?
Yes, I'm Adrian Peace. I am the proud dad of Austin and Alec. Austin is going to 4th grade and Alec is going to kindergarten in Lake Bluff.
Excellent. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Adrian.
I'm here.
Amanda.
Hi, Amanda. I teach 2nd grade. I think I might be kind of frozen, but good to see everybody.
Thanks, Amanda. How about Anne?
Hi, I'm Ann Svitkovich, and I teach choir, and I'm the fine arts team facilitator at the middle school, 6th through 8th.
Great. How about Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna Morris. I'm the reading specialist for grades 3 through 5.
Thank you, Anna. Let's go with Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy Duran. I am the dad of an incoming 4th grader, Emma Grace Duran, and an incoming 3rd grader. I'm sorry, incoming 5th grader, Emma Grace, and an incoming 3rd grader, Izzy. So really.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. Anne Hill.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anne. I have 3 kids, one going into 7th grade, one going into 5th grade, and one going into 2nd grade.
Thanks, Anne. Audrey?
Hi, my name is Audrey Jurov, and I will be the new elementary assistant principal with Kelly Bay.
Thanks, Audrey. Bethany?
I'm Bethany Plapp. I teach 5th grade at the elementary school.
Excellent. Thank you. Brian?
Hi, Brian DeYoung, 7th grade science at the middle school.
Thank you. Christy?
Hi, I'm Christy Leibfried. I teach Spanish to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders over at the elementary school.
Excellent. Erin?
I'm Erin Peckler. I teach kindergarten, and I also have an incoming first grader and an incoming 3-year-old coming to preschool next year.
Thank you. Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Comack. I teach math at the middle school, primarily to 7th and 8th graders, and I'll also be acting as the 8th grade team facilitator this year.
Excellent, thank you. Jackie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie. I'm the pre-K through 5th grade math enrichment specialist.
Thanks, Jackie. Jen?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Prosement. I'm an English language teacher for grades pre-K through 3rd grade, and I also do reading recovery with 1st grade struggling readers.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Hi, I'm Jeremy Solaric. I teach wellness pre-K through 5th grade at the elementary school, and I'm also the adaptive PE specialist, so I work with all grades with adaptive PE.
Thank you. Kate?
Hi, I'm Kate Whitehead, and I teach pre-K at the elementary school.
Thank you. Kathy?
Hi, I'm Kathy Sullivan. I am the nurse at the middle school.
Great. Kelly Bay?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kelly Bay, currently Director of Curriculum and Assistant Principal at the middle school, but as of July 1, I will take over as Principal of LBES. I also have an incoming pre-K3 son who will be at the elementary school.
Excellent, thanks. Kelly D. Kelly Doro?
Hi, I'm Kelly Doro. I'm the nurse at the elementary school.
Thanks. Maria?
Hello, my name is Maria. I'm an assistant teacher for pre-K in Lake Bluff Elementary School.
Thank you.
And also I have a 5th grade this year.
Excellent. Nice to meet you. Maureen?
Hi, I'm Maureen Hominick. I teach 6th grade language arts, and I'm the 6th grade team facilitator at the middle school.
Thank you. Nate?
Hello, everyone. Nate Blackmer. I'm the principal at Lake Bluff Middle School.
And Sarah?
Hi, Sarah Coleman. I'm a special education teacher at middle school.
I think we have one left. I think it's Vanessa.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Grum. I live in Lake Bluff, and I have a son who will be in 3rd grade next year. I also teach Spanish to kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade at the elementary school. And next year I will also be doing ELL at the middle school with Brandy.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate everyone coming together. It's a really great representative group of grades and departments and parents and teachers and administrators. We have our board members here, so I'm really excited to get started. I do want to remind everyone that to make sure that we have as many kind of voices involved in the process as possible, that our meetings will be live streaming as it is right now on YouTube. And they are being recorded so that folks can take a look at our discussions and kind of follow along as we're moving through our process. And I just always like to remind groups that I work with that we are all coming to this work presuming positive intent of each other. We all want the same thing for our kids. We want this to be a wonderful return to learn experience in the fall, as effective, as engaging as possible. And that's our goal for our kids together. And so together as a group, I just want us to stay collaborative and open-minded, make sure that we're kind and respectful in our discourse of each other. We will probably disagree and have some differing opinions on things, but that's good and that's healthy because it will get us to the right solutions for our students. This group is really, the purpose of the group is going to be really advisory in nature. And I'm hoping that everyone who comes here can bring with them some voices of others that you represent. So if you're, a parent of children in the younger grades or the older grades, teachers, kind of represent those people that you talk to and that you are friends with and network with, so that again, we can get as many voices as possible into our planning. The structure is really going to be, now that our guidance is coming a little bit quicker, our administrative team has already been planning and will be continuing to kind of refine and our draft plans. And the role of this group will be to kind of take a look at our plans and communication as we move through our process, so that you all can help us make sure that we're answering all the questions in the right way, that we are being clear, that our plans are making sense and are in the best interests of our students, parents, and teachers. And so really we're going to be bringing you information to take a look at so that you can help us by giving us your feedback and thoughts. So we will be meeting on Thursdays at 1. I understand this is summer and I understand this is a big commitment. And so I appreciate everyone's time. We're going to stay pretty close to a 1 hour each time and respect everyone's time. It will be in a webinar format so that others can log on and watch live or record it if they want to see it later. We will probably generally come together for 5 to 10 minutes in this kind of a format, introduce kind of the agenda, any new guidelines or any new information that we have, and then we will break into small groups and to kind of discuss whatever it is that we're bringing to the table and then come back together as a whole group. And I just want to again say the administrative team has been meeting and will continue to meet regularly to develop the plans and review your feedback, review feedback from stakeholders who are watching this process, and to work with our current guidance and our teachers to make sure that our plans are making sense for the fall. If you do happen to pass on this, which would be great if you would, pass on this opportunity to watch our meetings to anyone else, you can let them know that also on the website, there's a place for them to give feedback. There's a form right on the Return to Learn webpage. So if somebody happens to watch our meeting and has a thought like this, something they want to contribute, they can do it right there from that page. And with that, I think we're going to launch into my goal, and our goal hopefully is to develop a Return to Learn plan that holds true to our mission and vision. Just because we're in a really difficult and challenging situation, we want to always be guided by the fact that we are here to provide each student with quality instruction. We want to give learning opportunities and have educational environments that inspire academic achievement, personal growth, and responsible citizenship. And that we want excellence in education, keep kids enthusiastic, every student, every day. So that's the goal. And it's a bigger challenge right now, given the circumstances, but we want to make sure, I think, that this is always guiding our work. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sophie to talk to us a little bit about her perception of how things kind of unfolded in the spring, and then how they went as you move through the process, and then kind of we'll get to the remote learning survey, which you all hopefully had a chance to take a look at, and give you some time to give us your thoughts after you've looked at that survey feedback as well.
So to kind of set the stage, Nate texted me, actually the first or second day back from winter break, telling me that we had our first student that had just arrived back from Wuhan, China, and asked me if we would allow him in the building. At that time, there were no restrictions on students returning from China, or for that matter, anywhere. Within 2 weeks after that, we started having restrictions about not admitting students from China. We actually had a student that self-quarantined for the 14 days and returned about mid-January. Between mid-January and the end of February, I would share that I was inundated with data. People were starting to talk about what it was looking like in China, that schools were starting to close and businesses were starting to close. And I specifically remember, and I shared this with many of you, I turned 60 at the end of February, and there was a family party. And I freaked everyone out because I told them schools would go remote and that everyone was going to be sick and we were all going to be stuck at home. And I've been told recently that most of my family thought I was totally nuts and crazy. And they were shocked that literally within 2 weeks, schools were closed and we were at stay at home. It went very fast. We had a couple connection to connection, meaning a staff member whose spouse might have worked with somebody whose other spouse was diagnosed with COVID. We had a few of those. We checked out with the Illinois Department of Public Health, as well as the Lake County Department of Health. And as you know, then we had a Teacher Institute Day the 16th and started remote learning on the 17th. In in looking back, I think all of you will remember we had an early release day in early March. And at that time, I told all teachers to prepare lessons for 5 days, general lessons, just like we would be doing during a remote learning day. And I told them that we might need them. We don't know. So we wound up using those 5 days immediately upon closure. And the reason for that was we had to finish making sure all of our students had connectivity. Lori Brown was integral in making sure we had devices for everybody. And it gave teachers a little bit of time to regroup from working full-time to working full-time in their homes without childcare with kids and everything else. So we did those 4 days, whereas a lot of districts started remote learning straight out of the gate, full force ahead. All of those districts that did that wound up really scaling back because it was too much. We chose to go the more thoughtful route in the fact that we did these set assignments and then started our remote learning after spring break. How did it go? I think our staff rose to the occasion. We had many, many, many challenges in a district like ours. I would tell you that we had many, many families that the parents were like, this is too much, just give me the things we have to do, and we don't have time for anything else. To middle of the road, thank you so much for everything you're doing, we appreciate. To the other end of the road that said, this is not enough, you need to be conducting school, remote learning should be school at home. So when I looked at the data, and Lisa did a great job of summarizing the data, none of it surprised me. It was exactly the way that I would have pictured it, because when you look at quantitative data, the students felt supported by their teachers, and students and parents felt they could communicate with their teacher. No question, our teachers were available, our social workers were helping, our teaching assistants. The elementary school even went so far as hosting recesses so the kids could at least have communication. The teachers appreciated supportive administrators and time to collaborate. That is a key piece that really needs to follow through, because as you do your planning together and collaborating together is going to be integral, so you don't duplicate efforts, but you expand on some of the things you do. The opportunities for improvement from the remote learning surveys, parents felt that instructional strategies were not personalized to address the student needs, and that the amount of schoolwork was not appropriate to help children continue learning. And many teachers did not feel equipped to teach remotely. And then the question is, how do we communicate that to parents, which I know Lisa's going to bring you back, or even just to the community. When you look at the surveys, there's a whole file of qualitative or comments. And when you read through those, there are very distinct trends. The trends are almost identical to the quantitative data. Students felt supported by their teachers. Students and parents felt that they could communicate with their teachers. Teachers appreciated their time to plan. And then the opportunities for improvement, once again, parents and students felt like there wasn't enough to do, not enough face time, and that communication could be more streamlined. Teachers needed support with accountability and connection with students. So before we move on, I think I'd like to open it up to see what other information you could provide Lisa and the team as to, was there anything else that the members of this task force gained by reading the results of the survey or the comments? That would be a question I would ask all of you.
And Jean too, I feel so bad. I missed 2 of our people that were in the room when we did introductions. So if Michelle, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Sorry. I'm Michelle Grady, and I teach special ed at the elementary school. And I also am the president of the Teachers Council. So I am representing all of that.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. And Carrie?
Hi, I'm Carrie Steinbeck, president of the PTO, and I've got, I'll have 5 kids at the elementary school next year. And I'm sorry. I'm calling.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure everyone gets to know everyone that's in the room. So thank you, Jean, for kind of walking us through that. And yes, we're going to open it up now to kind of, hopefully people had a chance to take a look at it, or if you wanted to add something that you feel is important for the conversation, please feel free. And you can either use the raise hand feature on your participants list, or you can just unmute yourself and give any commentary.
Lisa, I did want to add, and teachers may want to talk more about this. From my perspective, once the governor made the decision that we were not going back to school, I think I kind of felt through the month of April, everybody was a little hopeful. Don't worry about it. Maybe we'll be able to at least come back in May. We could keep the students engaged. Once the governor made the decision to close school through the end of the year, I know that student engagement suffered. And I would share that I was very concerned about the social emotional health of everyone, because no matter who you talk to, everybody was stressed or not sleeping. Everybody, our students, our families, our staff, everybody was dealing with many, many different impacts of this. And I really felt like student learning changed a lot after the governor called school for the rest of the year.
And I would agree. And I'm obviously coming from a different school district, but I saw the same thing in my current district. It was a very, very difficult spring for everyone. And even now, those of you who have kids, I didn't talk about my own kids. I have a 15-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And yesterday we went out for the first time to a doctor's office for a well visit. And my middle daughter was almost paralyzed with fear, kind of looking at the systems and structures, having her temperature taken and the equipment that people were wearing. And so, you know, some of the things that we need to prepare for are those effects of the spring and the kids not having the interaction and now kind of starting to reintegrate with different systems and things like that. The social emotional wellness piece is going to be a high priority for sure, for students and for our staff and families. But with that, is there anything that anyone saw in the remote survey data that you'd like to highlight that wasn't on these slides?
I'll jump in. One of the things I saw, your bullet point is about communication could be more streamlined. I felt like that broke into 2 major threads. One of them was the communication coming from the school to the parents that was informing them of closures and durations and all of that stuff. And then the expectations that were being communicated to students, them knowing what was expected of them, when they were supposed to be signed in, how, and all of that. I think that was another big area of confusion for people, was what's expected of us. And parents highlighting they felt teachers needed better expectations of what we were expected to be doing too. So that's what I saw in the communication piece.
That's a great point, Heather. Thank you.
Something that I noticed when I looked through the data was that students felt that the quality and the amount of schoolwork was appropriate. And that was a little bit different from the parents' perspective. So that might be something to look at. And the other thing I noticed, along with those things that Jean mentioned, those were in my notes, was something that I thought about a area for growth was, how do we motivate the students to participate more? And then how do we work with them to participate independently? I saw a lot of parent feedback where parents needed to support their children at home during this learning environment. So I was thinking,
how do we across the age levels as a teacher and as a district work with those students so that they can work independently?
I think that's a great point, Christy. I think the balance for parents is really difficult. I had it for myself as well, kind of trying to work and handle everything that I needed to handle, plus supporting my kids and what they needed doing. So I think that's a great question for us, is how do we empower our kids to be able to do that? Thank you.
You know, as I'm thinking, I'm going to put both of those comments together because that's kind of what I lived with in my house. When we talk about the teachers needing clear expectations, we were waiting for guidance on, all they said was students cannot do worse. So I was really lucky because my 8th grader started out with B's and C's. And so I could sit back and relax because he couldn't go any lower, right? But if the teachers don't have clear expectations, and we didn't know, then they don't know what they're telling the kids about that. And then if you expound on that with the kids, what Christy was saying, in the school district where my son was attending 8th grade, that once he found out that he couldn't do worse and that he knew he was graduating, and they told him early on, he was done. There's absolutely no point in doing any work because I can't do worse. The expectation is so low that, and really the expectations were not clear to any of us from the state as well. So I think that part of the key to getting the kids motivated is really figuring out what the expectations are going to be ahead of time, because kids will rise to the occasion if they know that the expectation is that they're supposed to do this work. We just didn't know what the expectation was going to be.
Yeah, agreed. That was difficult.
I also think that there's a social emotional piece that goes in with the motivation. I know, speaking from my own kindergartner and having kids and emails from parents, that kids just simply don't want to get on Zoom calls because it makes them more upset that they can't be with their friends and they're lacking that interaction. So I think that overall, we need to consider in the amount of work and things that kids are doing also, not just for the young primary kids who their whole learning experience is a more social one than the older kids, but for the older kids also who are with texting and cell phones, like not being able to be with their friends and their peers. Even as a teacher, like having to see the kids through a screen and not like the emotional toll that takes on us every day. And knowing that we can't be with them too, I can only imagine it for small kiddos. So I know that the motivation and the participation too does also have to do with the kids and what they're going through socially and emotionally on that end.
Point.
That is a great point. And I don't know if this happened to anybody else, but my own kids got very self-conscious on the live sessions about what was going on in our house, or people, walking behind the screen, or what was behind them when they were on with their friends. And it happened with my younger kids, but it also happened with my high schooler, who was kind of like, his little sisters are running around. Everyone's on a different schedule. You never know what's going to happen. And so there was a stress and anxiety for my kids about being live with their teachers that wasn't about school and academics. It was very much about the social piece.
One thing if I can jump in, one thing we talked quite a bit about in the middle school was kids had this, and it ties together, the feeling that once they kind of got behind, that it was this mountain that they couldn't climb up. And as a team, it was working to figure out, okay, what class or what subject can we focus on to start some forward momentum to help you with? And some of that was really just conversational in team meetings due to the nature of this unprecedented time. But one thing that I would love for our committee to look at is, let's say there is a student that is struggling to be engaged, whether we're in person, a hybrid or not, whatever it might be, how can we have some common expectations to say these will be our focus areas instead of deferring that to kind of an ad hoc basis. And so that was something that we saw quite a bit, and we had a lot of success getting kids to begin to engage with different subjects. But there were, aside from the really coordinated efforts of our special education teachers, for kids just in the general education curriculum, there was no exact consistency there, and I'd like that to improve some.
Thanks, Joe.
I think another thing I want to share on communication, which is typical, but I think I need to highlight it a little bit, is when I was getting parent phone calls about this isn't being done and this isn't being done, I would go back to one of the principals and it was indeed being done. But picture this, what the kids were telling their parents was different than what was actually going on. So, you know, Lisa, I've shared with you, we're a small district. We don't have a communications expert. We typically decide on communication at the admin team level on putting that together. But I think that, I know in the beginning, we did not communicate as much as we should have, frankly, because we just didn't have the time. We were trying to get caught up and get everything in alignment. But I do think the communication is important for those few kids that don't actually tell their parents exactly what is going on.
Thank you. I think that happens a lot.
And I want to say, I feel like we did communicate a lot more than I think maybe it felt like, Jean. But, you know, I live in a different community and my kids go to a different school, and I was like completely clueless as to what was going on with them the majority of the spring. So that's why working in Lake Bluff, I was just like, God, thank God we communicate. And it may not, like Jean said, there wasn't a lot that we could say definitively, but at least we said we can't say definitively, you know, we at least tried to keep everybody updated. And I tried to, you know, I was in constant communication with Jean and the administrators, and then I tried to keep the teachers updated. And it's just, like I said, I live in a community where I had no idea what was going on at school with the children, and I couldn't even help them a lot of the time because I didn't know. So that's just my take on that.
Thanks, Michelle.
One thing that I want to give a voice to is families who are struggling during this time, as well as teachers, to balance their home life. I know with my own kids, one of my kids' teachers had a kid on her lap while she was trying to teach. There are oftentimes Zoom meetings where I had moms, you know, trying to do all of this stuff. We also had students who were like in a break room trying to Zoom while their parents were working. So I just want to make sure that we keep in mind our teachers as well as our parents who are also working. I know in my own house at 10 o'clock, my kindergartner had a Zoom meeting, I had a Zoom meeting, and my other, you know, older daughter had a meeting. And, you know, kindergartners are not as independent as you think. So that's something I'd like to consider too, because that adds extra stress for everybody. You know, so something I just want to make sure we think about.
Yeah, I wanted to add one more thing to that about, I think we should continue to look at this with a really big lens of equity as well. I feel like our community, you know, there were a couple comments about like feeding families being a priority versus education. And I just feel like we really need to continue to provide those services to our families that need it. While it is a smaller population than some districts where their focus really is entirely on equity, we still have that in Lake Bluff for sure. And I just want to make sure that those families are also taken care of and those children are treated with the same respect that the rest of our population would be. So that's another thing that I don't know sometimes the representative sample of the surveys, like what parents are actually able to take them or have access. So I just want to speak up for those families whenever I can, because I want to ensure that they are also a part of everything.
Thank you, Amanda and Audrey, both of you.
If I could comment on the communication part, I do feel like it would have been really helpful to almost get the lesson plans or more of what the kids would be expected of or doing every single day, because even though we don't get that information because we're not at school, we kind of brought school into the household, and it would have been much easier to manage a time schedule or a daily, the Zooms and all that if we had a time schedule each week, like of the expectations, mainly for the older ones, even though that they were able to get through their slides and do all their stuff. It would be nice to know what they were working on versus the little ones. It was a lot more hand holding. And you did know what they were needing to do every day because you were in it with them. But I just think it would be helpful to keep them on task, knowing every day what they needed to do.
Thanks, Carrie. That's good feedback. Any other thoughts?
You know, one of the questions, Lisa, that I didn't see a whole lot on the results, but it concerned me is the social emotional needs of kids when this was going on. I know there were a few instances where we had to call DCFS after teachers had heard things, but I was actually rather surprised at the feedback that there wasn't a whole lot of information on that. And that's probably my number one concern going back in August.
I agree. And I think as we're planning and as we listen to conversations about how people are planning, SEL is definitely a focus, and we want to make sure our kids are healthy and well, whatever situation we're in. I'm also hearing a lot of districts think about focusing on priority areas. But I have some concerns about that myself from my perspective. I feel like, you know, in the district that I'm coming from, we made some things non-negotiable, some things optional so that we could make sure that it felt manageable for people. But I know in my own situation that the basics, you know, the math and the ELA and those kinds of topics were definitely paid attention to a little bit more than the related arts. And I wonder, this is the wonder that I have, if remote learning felt so heavy at times because that was, you know, kids were really focused on getting that important work done, and it's very important. But without the related arts, without the movement, without the music, without those conversations with their teachers, without the connections that way, it would feel a little bit heavier. So in my mind, I'm thinking about the balance between core academics and related arts, because they really do, they're both essential, and they're both essential for the school experience. So as we're moving forward, that's something that I'd like to think about a little bit more, because a lot of our wellness depends on balance, you know, as human beings. And so I want to make sure whatever we build into our plan has a healthy balance for everybody involved. And I think that's a great point you bring up, Jean.
I might just add on to that. I think that the balance to support social emotional learning, in addition to that, I know the word motivation came up. And so interest can help guide. That's our 5-minute warning for this time period for this topic. But what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, you're going to be more motivated to do. And so that's something else to consider if we want to increase motivation. Consider that, you know, we had to make decisions about must-dos and can-dos at the time, but we may want to think more broadly about motivating students by allowing them to pursue some of the passion areas, whether that be science or social studies or the fine arts. So we have 5 minutes left on this topic. As timekeeper, just want to make sure that I'm doing my job.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, well, I really appreciate everyone weighing in on your thoughts about not only how things went, but also kind of digging into that survey feedback, and I know it was a lot. So as we move through, if we want to keep referring back to it, and as we move through the meetings, if you have a chance to keep perusing it and find other things in there that you'd like to bring up, please do. And I think that part of our work together will also be how do we collect fresh data in a continual basis too, to make sure that we're still informing our work as we move through this process. And some of it will be, I think, on the academic and the structure sides and the things that we've been talking about. And some of it will probably be checking in on SEL and all those pieces that we're concerned about. So with that, if there's nothing else, let's give one more minute. Okay, then we are going to move on to the 3 scenarios that administrative teams everywhere are grappling with right now and have been for a while. So essentially, we know that Illinois has a phased plan for revitalization. That is phase 5, revitalization. And currently we're in phase 3. If we were to remain in phase 3, we would start the year in remote learning 2.0. We would start it as kind of what we've been doing in the spring, but enhancing it with the information that we have. In phase 3, the guidance is pretty restrictive, and it would be very hard to get a majority or even some of our kids in school. So phase 3 is really prohibitive of in-person instruction. If we are able to get to phase 4, then we would probably be looking at some kind of a hybrid model of in-person and remote learning opportunities. And depending on how the guidance rolls out in the next couple of days in terms of group size, and that changes too. And so I cannot underscore Dr. Sophie's point enough about the guidance changing from our State Board of Education, from our departments of health, from the governor's office, from our organizations that we work with. As the guidance rolls out, then there are questions, things get clarified, things get moved around. So really part of the biggest challenge of this is staying on top of what we are being advised to do in order to keep everyone safe. But I think we can all fairly say that in a phase 4, at this point, there'll be some kind of a remote option for students to make sure that we're rounding out the day. And of course, if we get to phase 5 by the fall, then we're in-person instruction. But remember, phase 5 is with a vaccine. And I don't believe that we are going to have a vaccine prior to August. So what we're talking about, the likelihood is we will have some in-person instruction, but we will have to have safety measures and precautions in place. And I know that everybody here has probably been watching the rest of the world, and it's kind of nice that we're able to do this planning now when some other countries have opened up, and we've been able to see some different models of how we can do school in person with some of these protective measures and screening processes and procedures in place. We're learning a lot, and in a great way. This situation and our ability to move through it would have been much more difficult if we didn't have the ability to watch and communicate and collaborate with other countries and many organizations trying to help us through it. So the scenarios that our team are working on really are the hybrid piece. What would it look like to get as many students as school and teachers in school as possible? And then when they're not with us, how can we make sure that the remote portion, whatever that looks like, is the most effective and engaging remote situation that we can have for our students first and foremost, and the most manageable for our teachers and parents. So as we come together, these are the 3 kind of scenarios that we're going to be talking about as potential for return to learn in the fall. Are there any questions about that? So my thinking around this task force has changed a little bit. In my current district, we've been running a task force that has had subcommittees where we've had one kind of focused on feedback and communication, and then a couple others focused on 2 areas, instruction and assessment, health and operations. But the work was a little bit slower in the last 2 months because a lot of what we figured out and implemented and then began our task force. So my thinking at this point, like I said in the beginning, is that there's going to be 2 main areas that we're going to be working on. One is health and operations. So as we return to learning, how can we ensure that our operations are safe and effective and meeting the guidelines for compliance and manageable for the people that we have involved? And then also on the instruction and assessment side, what does the learning experience look like? What does it look like when kids are with us? And what does it look like when they're not with us? And those two areas are the areas that we're going to need feedback on from this task force and ultimately from the rest of the community. I just want to make sure I'm not frozen. Am I still good? Okay, thank you. All right. So we'll be bringing plans that reflect these two areas, health and operations, instruction and assessment, and we'll be looking for your feedback and guidance to tell us where we need to be more clear, where things are not going to work, or where we see challenges. In terms of a timeline, I'm going to be shooting out, after today's meeting, a resource page that's going to give access to lots of different articles, guidance documents, other kind of resources for so that we can build some background together. And I would appreciate it if everyone took a little bit of time to explore some of those resources. I believe we'll be getting guidance from the state either today or tomorrow, and it'll be the most recent guidance. So what I'm going to ask is that when I'm able to attach that to that resource page, that be one of the things that you start to take a look at, but that our next meeting next week, I will try to summarize the highlights of the non-negotiables that we're going to have to make sure that we're addressing before we can get kids back into school. And we'll have a talk about what some of those things might look like in Lake Bluff. So for example, we know that there's going to be some guidance around screening students before they come to school. And we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. And there will probably be some areas where we will have choice in what that looks like for our district. So part of what we'd like to do next week is kind of take an overview of the most current guidance and start to put out there, if we're going to get back to school, these are some of the things that we are going to have to be baked into our plan so that we can make sure that everyone's safe. And then I'd like to take that week of July 2nd off. It's a holiday week. I know everybody's going to be hopefully busy having family time, but our administrative team will be coming back together to start looking at drafting some pretty concrete plans. And I would love to review a tentative communication with this group to the community at our meeting on the 9th. And that would be an overview of kind of what our plan is looking like at that point. And then hopefully to be able to send something out to the community mid-July. And then throughout those 2 weeks, we'll be looking at refining our plan, fine tuning, and that's where we will start to work together end of July. What do all of these logistics look like, and how can we develop additional communication or development tools for our parents, for our students, for our teachers, so that when we come back, whatever it looks like, everyone has a good idea of what it will look like, what they're going to have to do, what our procedures are going to be, because things are potentially going to look really, really different coming back in the fall, regardless of what the scenarios are. And then kind of together as a group towards the end of July, when we're coming into August, together we'll start to talk about what our work could look like, what it needs to address at that point, given whatever happens to be coming up at that time. I can say that in my experience in the last however many months it's been, 3 or 4 months, every week something comes up and my thoughts change a little bit. So for me to even predict out a month is kind of ambitious of where we might be at. But I wanted to create some kind of a timeline to guide our work. Are there any questions or thoughts about that? Jean, yep.
The only thing I want to say so that the committee hears it, because you and I have already talked about it, it's going to be integral to remain in contact with Lake Forest High School and elementary. Our community is, they compare each other quite often, but as you know, you and Mike have already started talking about that, and just important to enforce with the committee that that's really something that needs to be taken into consideration.
I appreciate it. That's very true. And just so everybody here is aware too, I've been meeting with the Lake County superintendents for a few months now in those meetings with Jean. And then also have started, Jean's been gracious enough to kind of get me into some of the smaller group superintendent and area superintendent groups, as well as Lake Bluff community leadership groups. So I've already been in contact with a lot of the organizations that are in Lake Bluff and feel pretty confident that our articulation will be strong moving into the fall. And we know, I just want to assure you, in my mind, first and foremost, the goal, like I said, is to create a manageable situation. In my own life, I'm, constantly thinking about how this is going to look. If my kids who are in 2 different districts happen to be in a situation where some are in and some are out, the goal is to keep families together. So I just want you to know, first and foremost, if we are in a hybrid situation where kids are in sometimes and out sometimes, the goal will be to organize that by family so that you're not constantly thinking about having some kids in and some kids out. Anything else on that? And with that, I kind of wanted to wrap up and give us an opportunity. If anyone has any questions or thoughts, I would appreciate, just go ahead and jump in.
Lisa, probably another reminder for this committee is people are going to start hearing all kinds of things about what other districts are doing. For instance, Stevenson has already made the announcement that they're going to start out the year remote. I think that everybody just needs to collect that data for you, but nobody should panic because we just have to do pretty much all we have to do is work with Lake Forest. Everybody else can do thing. The concern is, as you and I have both talked about, if my kids go to, I'm going to use Michelle's example, Mundelein, and Mundelein decides to do remote learning and we're in school, then childcare is going to be the other issue.
Yeah, and that again is something that we are all very aware of. And you have administrators in the district who are in the same predicament. We have a lot of staff who are struggling with how this is going to look in the fall. So just know that is on top of our minds, thinking creatively about how we can support people through this. And the other thing to think about is we really need to keep in mind why we're in this situation. The fact of the matter is we're not in this situation because it's anybody's choice. We are in the middle of a health crisis that nobody could really see coming. And, I try to keep up with news and kind of watching the way the rest of the world is opening up and what the ramifications are of that. And you see it all over the board, right? Some are feeling like they're able to maintain, some are seeing spikes again. Many people are predicting a spike in the fall and the winter, like we've seen with previous pandemics. And so all of us are also working under the assumption that whatever our plan is on July 15th or August 1st or September 15th or whatever we happen to be doing in October, we may have to adjust and pivot quickly again based on what happens in our community with this virus. Because that's the nature of what we're dealing with right now until we have a vaccine that we feel like we can keep people safe. And again, that's not just the folks in our building. It's our kids going home to people with medically fragile relatives, people who are interacting with other folks who might be medically or immunocompromised. So again, there's a lot to consider here. There's a lot of moving parts. And I think one really helpful piece to me, a part of the work of being on this committee, is to kind of be ambassadors of the fact that we are trying to be very collaborative and trying to be very transparent and addressing all the issues that we know are apparent in Lake Bluff. And when you're out in the community or you're talking to your friends or your colleagues, to kind of reassure people that we are listening and we want to hear your feedback and we want your voice to be heard. So helping people to kind of calm a little bit as we're moving through the fall, because we will handle it. We will open up, however that looks. And we will try to make sure that it is, again, the most effective and engaging and manageable remote or in-person or hybrid situation, the best learning experience that we can have for our students in the fall that we can possibly design given our constraints. So I would appreciate your help in that, to kind of reassure people that we're on the path and that we're making good plans and we're listening to people's feedback. And with that, is there anything else?
I wanted to just toss in that I think something I want to make sure that we keep in mind as we're talking about all these plans is when you talk about a hybrid situation, students in school, but students out of school, I think the biggest anxiety I have, and I've heard from colleagues, is that sounds like I'm going to be doing twice the work because I'm going to be planning for in-school lessons with all the accommodations and everything else. And I'm also going to have to be providing quality content for kids who are at home. And if you are a teacher that teaches more than one subject or grade level or something in a day, now that becomes exponentially more anxiety provoking. So I want to make sure that in the course of this, we're really respecting that what sounds good on paper is going to be, could be very tough for teachers to execute in real life. And that's even just things like having the time this summer to prep and do things. There's a lot we have to consider with that.
Absolutely, Heather. Thank you for bringing that up. And I think there's been a lot of different models that have been thrown around in terms of a hybrid where teachers would be sharing the load in terms of maybe assigning some team members to handle a remote situation and some to handle the in-person side of things. Because the fact of the matter is we are potentially going to have staff who need to be out as well. And so we need to be thinking creatively about how to pair students and teachers together, considering their personal circumstances and what they can handle, and whether or not they can be with us. So that is absolutely a high priority and a concern to look at our teams and the way we collaborate in a creative way so that it is, again, manageable for our teachers and staff. Because whatever we design, if we can't implement it, then it doesn't matter what we designed.
Yeah, agreed, Lisa. And one of the things though that sounds like really doable and creative at the middle school, our science teachers are the only science teacher at a grade level. So they're responsible for a year-long curriculum by themselves. So to say, who do you pair them with to make sure that if they have to be home with their kids, someone's doing this, or you do the remote and I'll do the in-person, that could become more of a creativity type issue with the middle school, just because of the nature of how small we are.
No, I hear you. And to reassure you, I'm coming from a situation that's exactly the same in my current district. One teacher per content per grade at the junior high is a tough way to run because you don't have a partner. So I get it. Well, and I'm not saying I have an answer, but I do hear you and thank you for bringing it up.
I just want to jump on board with a couple things. I agree that we're all in it together. So, that's very encouraging. I know that Tracy's not here today, but one thing I also want to make sure is on our radar is our SPED department and students. That's not always as black and white as Gen Ed can be. So I know that a lot of things have been put in place thus far between Kevin and Tracy that they'll continue to do, but that's just another area and subgroup we need to think about. And then I'm also really glad you brought up the idea that not all of our staff might be coming back due to different reasons. So I want to make sure that we can try to get ahead of that as best we can, or partner in a way so that it works. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, we're going to be having to work with some assumptions. So, as our admin team plans, there's going to have to be some assumptions built into our planning because we are, we're working with an unpredictable situation here that will probably change throughout the course of the year. So as we share our plans, we'll also be sharing those assumptions that we're talking through. And because at some point we have to make some concrete plans. And so built into those will be a consideration of what percentage of students we believe will be out at any given time, what percentage of staff who may be out at any given time. The fact that we may, have to close certain classrooms, areas of a building due to a positive case, all those kinds of factors will have to be built into the plan so that we can be proactive and know how we're going to deal with that when it arises. I want to be really respectful of everyone's time. It is 2:01 and we did start on time. So I just want to thank everyone for your participation today. I really appreciate you giving us the time and giving us your thoughts about how things went. And I look forward to working with you throughout the summer. This is going to be challenging, but I know we can do it. And I know, especially given today's conversation, that you guys are invested and ready to go with us on this journey. So thank you. And if you have any questions or any thoughts after the meeting, feel free to email me or give me a call and we will talk through it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.